Welcome back to the third part of my series about the trip to North Korea in 2016. In the first two parts I covered my trip to the country and the first day in which the group I was in visited the Mansu Hill monuments, Manggyo-dae village, Pyongyang subway, Grand People's Study House, Victorious Fatherland Liberation War Museum and other locations around the capital of the DPRK. The second day of our visit was dedicated to the trip to the demilitarized zone between the two Koreas. Every morning started with the wake-up call at 7 o'clock. Before departing the hotel, we had breakfast, which turned into another interesting routine. We were seated down at large round tables. At the far end of the room, there were tables with containers which we assumed contained food. We wanted to help ourselves, but the very friendly staff just instructed us to sit back down. Then they proceeded to bring the food to our tables. Later we discovered that those containers were empty and our food was brought in directly from the kitchen. Menu turned out to be the same every day. We got some soy sprouts that most of us skipped. Each of us got 2 spoons of butter, 1 spoon of marmalade, 2 toasts, 1 pancake and an egg in some form. We could choose between tea and coffee, but they did not have any milk, only some yogurt. This day was dedicated to the visit to the border between the two Koreas. It lies about 170 kilometers south of Pyongyang. We went down the highway leading out of the capital and passed under the Reunification monument. Miss Lee spoke about how the people of North Korea yearn for reunification with the South. All the leaders were working to make that dream happen. Kim Il-sung actually passed away while drafting a document which could make that happen. His last signature on that document was actually turned into a monument, which we later saw at the border. As she explained, the only obstacle preventing the peaceful reintegration of the two Koreas is American imperialism. We passed near the Manggyo-dae village park we visited yesterday. Miss Lee told us another anecdote from the life of the eternal president. After the end of the war, Pyongyang was destroyed by bombings. Kim Il-sung visited a local steel mill and addressed the workers. He told them that the rebuilding efforts could really use another 10,000 tons of steel more than their quota was. He managed to motivate them so much that they produced 60,000 tons of steel more than their quota was. Highway was empty and very bumpy. My app for counting steps recorded about 68,000 steps that day alone because of all the shaking. Every 50 kilometers or so, there is no divider between the lanes and both of them turn into a large open flat area. Most likely, those are emergency runways in case of war. Also, we regularly saw large concrete pillars by the road on both sides. I guess they were designed in a way that they can be collapsed on the road to block it in the case of an invasion. During our stay in North Korea, we often had the feeling that they act like the war stopped yesterday and will most likely continue tomorrow. While we looked through the windows, we didn't see many cities or towns, but we saw a lot of cultivated fields. Only about 20% of the territory of North Korea is suitable for agriculture. That is why every useful piece of soil is turned into cultivated land. About halfway to the border, we made a short pause on the highway rest area. It had toilets, but no staff was present. During the ride here, we saw just a handful of cars, so we could walk across the highway and take pictures. When we continued, our guide Lee continued with the facts about the DPRK. She informed us that illiteracy was eradicated already in 1949. They have a natural-based cure for cancer. Everybody is happy and loves the country and its leaders. Schools are founded everywhere, even on remote islands, and for just 2 or 3 children. Volunteer teachers are working in those schools and selflessly travel there. Military is not mandatory, but most of the people join because of their love of the country. We asked if Mr. Kim went to the military. Miss Lee said that Mr. Kim was still a student. She also talked about education and career choices. Mandatory education lasts for 12 years. After the children finish it, they have 3 choices: go to college, go to work, or go to the military. On the last part of the road leading to the border, there are 4 security checkpoints. It is especially prohibited to take pictures there. Moving around DPRK is even more restricted for civilians. People living in the countryside cannot freely visit the cities. They need special permits and passports. It is likely that the government also restricted moving towards the border with the south to prevent defections. When we had to stop on some checkpoint, Mr. Kim went to talk with the soldiers guarding the posts and signed the paperwork to let us through. In Sinchon, close to the highway where we were driving, the Museum of American War Atrocities is located. We didn't go and see it, but it is a very graphical museum depicting alleged American war crimes which happened in the area. The fact is that killings occurred here while the area was held by American and South Korean troops. Both North and the South conducted purges at the held and captured territory. The official reports of the South Korean History Organization concluded that both sides committed crimes and the Americans' fault was that they didn't stop that. We arrived at the border next to the city of Kaesong. First location we went to visit was the local shop. Afterwards, the local officer introduced himself and our guides explained that the officer would accompany us during our stay in the border area. Today it was Mr. Kim's turn to translate the local guides. His English was also good, although a bit slower than Miss Lee's. Mr. Kim said that the officer was going with us only for our security, as they never know if the other side would try something sinister. They both explained the situation about the border area using a map. We would visit the Truce village and the Joint Security Area, or JSA for short. Before the Korean War, the border between the 2 countries followed the 38th parallel. During the war, the front line and the border were moved up and down several times. When the war stalled, the negotiations started and in the end only a ceasefire and an armistice were achieved. Even after 70 years, official peace was never signed. The border now is different than before the war. Even though they lost more territory than the south, it seems that the northern side has accepted it because the border moved closer to the southern capital of Seoul. That way, the city is in range of North Korean artillery. In 1953, when the armistice was signed, a demilitarized zone was established. It stretches 2 kilometers on both sides of the border. It was agreed that no troops, military equipment or maneuvers would be held inside that zone. In the area we visited, the Truce village and the joint security area are located. Truce village is where representatives from both sides were meeting and discussing the end of the hostilities. Joint security area are those blue and grey buildings which are built exactly on the border. This was made to ease the communication between two sides. They also told us that there was a village in their part of the actual DMZ where about 300 families were living happily and peacefully. We boarded the bus again and went down the road, which was dug into the ground like a trench. On the sides we saw concrete barricades which could easily be collapsed into the trench and block it in the event of an assault. We stopped in Truce village. Our guides explained that everything here is as it was left after the negotiations. There is a table where top representatives were sitting. On the one side there were representatives of North Korea and on the other there were representatives of the US and other countries which fought in the UN coalition. They said that this is where Americans with their puppet states came to beg for peace because of the superiority of North Korea. It is very interesting to read about those negotiations. They were going on and were very frustrating for the UN side. The issue is that the representatives of the North weren't authorized to comment or reply on the requests and suggestions of the other side. When they were asked a question or a statement, they would check the book with questions and answers they were given by their leadership. If the question was not in the book, there was also no reply available. In that case, they would write it down without any comments. The issue was later discussed in the Northern High Command and a statement would or wouldn't be given, which was read on the next round of the negotiations. If the UN side would again ask something that wasn't anticipated in the book, the process repeated from the start. In the house they have also displayed various pictures of the war and later successes of the president and the general. There are also original truce documents and flags. Guides explained that we can see their DPRK flag here, but that the USA tried to hide their defeat by the UN flag. We continued to the JSA. On both sides of the border a large command building is located. Between them there are 7 smaller buildings. 4 of them are grey and 3 are blue. Grey ones are North Korean and blue ones are South Korean. A line divides them in half and that is the actual border between the countries. We stopped behind the North's command building. Here they showed us the monument to the last signature of the late Kim Il-sung. In the itinerary of the whole trip it was written that we will visit the houses laying directly on the border and in that way technically visit South Korea. Our guides welcomed us to the JSA and immediately added nobody goes across the border. We didn't ask anything and followed them to the North's command building. This area was founded to make the communication between the two sides easier. Unfortunately, it is more known for the many defections of the northern soldiers and the incidents between the two sides, like the Korean axe murder incident in 1976. We climbed to the top level of the command building and saw the surrounding area. We could see huge speakers constructed by South Korea. They use them to blast K-pop towards the north as part of their propaganda skirmishes. Also, the largest flagpole in the world is located here. Close nearby, the Bridge of No Return is located. It is a bridge going from the south to the north. At the end of the Korean War, the people living up and under the 38th parallel were still closer than they are today. Prisoners of war held on both sides were given the chance to either stay where they were captured or to walk the bridge to the other country, but only once, hence the name. For example, those captured by North could stay in the north or return by the bridge back to the south, but they couldn't change their mind later. This was a compromise solution on which the north side agreed only after a lot of talks, as many captured North Korean soldiers and Chinese volunteers did not want to be exchanged back. We took a photo with the officer who was accompanying us and returned back through the trench to Kaesong. We drove through the city streets and the city seemed very nice. Pavement was in a better state and the buildings seemed newer than those we saw up north. Maybe it was because of the proximity to the border. We stopped in a local restaurant to have lunch. In the restaurant there was another group of foreign tourists, but we couldn't go and speak with them. On the top of the hill next to the restaurant, we saw another two huge bronze statues of the Eternal President and the General. We also saw their faces on the huge billboards by the streets throughout our trips around the country. They are also present in the classrooms, trains, buildings. Everyone, and really everyone, was also wearing the badges with their smiling faces. On one occasion, we asked how there are no pictures or statues of the Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un. Our guides explained that the leaders serve the people. They do it completely selflessly, and it is their duty while they are alive. After they die, they become holy and sacred, and then they are remembered. After lunch, we went to see the Koryo Museum located here. Koryo is an old name used for the Old Korean Kingdom, which ruled over the whole peninsula before being conquered in the late 19th century. The old capital was located here, and the old academy from the 11th century is still preserved and turned into a museum. It is also on the UNESCO World Heritage List. We went through the museum very quickly, as maybe we were behind schedule. Towards the end of the tour through the museum, we were almost running after our guides. Still, we had time to stop in the museum shop. They had all kinds of varieties of the local tea made from ginseng, for which they claimed can cure cancer as well. They were very proud of their ginseng. Next to the entrance to the Koryo Museum, there is a huge building built in recognizable North Korean style. Our guides explained that it is Light Technologies University. After the visit to the museum, we started our drive back to Pyongyang. On the way back, the visit to a local farm was planned. It was explained that we will see a very successful farm and meet some local farmers and talk with them. We got excited about the idea and asked the guides if we will actually talk to some real local people. After 2 days of being isolated from any kind of contact with other people, the concept itself started to sound like something wild. The guides confirmed and looked at us like we were asking something strange. We turned from the highway and entered into some smaller city. What I remember from the streets the most was a big monument of an AK-47 standing in the middle of a roundabout. We were expecting to stop on a farm, but we stopped in front of a one-story building without windows. After asking where the farm was, we were just instructed to go inside. It turned out that we came to see a museum about Kim Il-sung's visit to the farm on the 16th of August 1970.
So here this is a picture of the President Kim Il-sung when she was visiting this place on the 16th of August 1970.
이 대한수련님께서는 지난날 김일성만이 지배하던 중국을 사회주의 문화문화의 헌법에 띄워주셨습니다.
The President Kim Il-sung turned this place, this farm, which was a backward farm in the past, into a socialist fairyland.
우리 위대한 해원 스님들의 흉명한 유교에서 우리 미국의 공장은 해방전에는 농표 정보다 한 톤 더 기원해야 된다면서 이제는 멸
He gave local and field guidance and brought a lot of wisdom here. After seeing the terrain, he instructed where they should build the houses and where to plant what kind of plants. He also made contributions to the irrigation system and instructed how the watering of the fields should be done. With all that guidance, they went from producing 1 ton of rice per hectare to producing 10 tons of rice per hectare. First 8 or so rooms were dedicated to that visit. There were photos of the eternal president looking over the field. On the other side, there was a photo of that particular part of the field he was looking at. The other rooms showed the visit of the general, Jong Il. He also came here with the guidance, and thanks to him, the production was additionally improved. This farm became the most successful farm in the whole country. There are also some artifacts from the visit. During the visit, some elections were held and Jong Il fulfilled his patriotic duty of voting in this particular place. They have kept the ballot box from that glorious day. They also showed us some boxes in which the general brought some special bugs which eat only the bad weeds and poop out high-quality fertilizer.
So we grow this insect and we put it into the field, in the wild space, and they grow there, and they while living in the fields, they eat the grass, except the rice, they eat them, and after eating the grass and some things, they produce the shit, and that becomes the fertilizer. It becomes good fertilizer for the crops.
Sorry? I thought we had sheep, but then I had everyone else.
So this kind of farming is good because it spares the labor cost, because it spares the fertilizers, so it's a good way of farming.
One of my favorite books from my collection on North Korea is Jong Il Looking at Things. The book came from a blog of the same name, which was started by an art director from Portugal. On the blog, he posted official propaganda pictures of Jong Il. Each of them is strikingly similar. They all consist of Jong Il surrounded by his aides and looking at something, whatever it was. His aides always hold some notebooks and wait for him to say something important and write it down. Maybe the best review of the book was given by Martin Parr and Jerry Badger in The Photo Book, A History Volume 3. The book ranges from the sublime to the ridiculous, but the unconscious humor in the images derives from the fact that no matter how humble the object, each picture has been given the same portentous formulaic treatment. In this museum of the farm, I recognized some of the pictures from the blog and the book and was thrilled by it. After we explored all of the halls with photographs, we were taken to a local hill overlooking the surrounding area. From here we could see everything around us and also how vast the farm was. Everything was impeccably organized and clean, but in the end we didn't speak to a single local. When we got back to Pyongyang, it was already late afternoon. By the city streets we saw more of those kiosks. Most of them were closed, but in one I saw something that looked like a local fast food. We saw stores on the first floors of the buildings. Most of them were in the dark and it seemed that they were closed. We couldn't see clearly inside, but it looked like most of them had just a couple of different products inside. Even though they seemed well stacked, 90% of the time we didn't see anyone inside. Another thing felt strange while we were driving through the streets of Pyongyang. Something was different from the scenery a person is usually used to while driving through the city, but I simply couldn't tell what it was. It wasn't only the lack of any advertisements or commercials. There are no billboards or ads of any kind, not on the tram stations or commercials on the walls of buildings. There are only patriotic messages and pictures of their leaders. Another thing that North Korea is missing are cafes or restaurants that are usually located on the ground floors in cities. One of my friends later commented that is very efficient, so people do not waste time on drinking coffee. Also, I cannot recall seeing anyone just walking, like for an exercise or going for a walk. Everyone seemed to be in a rush and like they were trying to get where they were going as efficiently as possible. Also, all the parks we saw were empty. There were no people playing with their kids or sitting on the benches in the parks. After 2 days of wondering what is wrong with the sights of the cities, it finally dawned on me. There were no parking spaces. In every other city, masses of cars parked by the streets are an unfortunate sight. Only parking lots in Pyongyang we could see were next to some large buildings and institutions. While driving around Pyongyang, we saw a lot of construction sites. All the work seemed to be going on at a very slow pace. We also didn't see a lot of construction vehicles like trucks or cement mixers, so it seemed that most of the work was being done by hand. Some of the sites looked like they were in the same state for a long time as the fresh, exposed concrete seemed to start crumbling already. Also in Pyongyang we saw more traffic than in the countryside. There are public buses and trams. Citizens were mostly using those or walking. Most of them were overcrowded with passengers. Some of the people are also using bikes like in the countryside. Others were pulling their belongings on small handmade trolleys. Also, we saw some cars, but it seemed that all of them were government-owned. A lot of people we saw from the bus bowed their heads while we were passing like they didn't want to be seen. That evening we had a dinner at Duck Barbecue, the best restaurant in the whole of Pyongyang. We got raw meat and prepared it ourselves on heaters built in tables. After the meal, they took us to the basement to see the stamp shop. Obviously, there are a lot of avid stamp collectors in North Korea, as we saw stamp collections in every souvenir shop we visited in those couple of days. I asked our guide Lee if maybe they have a stamp with the motif of Jong Il riding the tiger we saw yesterday. She looked at me like I wasn't the first person to ask her that. Still, she asked the lady working there, but unfortunately, they didn't have that motive. Before returning to the hotel, we were supposed to have a half-spontaneous evening out. Miss Lee told us that we are going to a special bar with lots of different kinds of beer to taste them and to try the local karaoke. She mentioned that maybe even Mr. Kim would go all out on the karaoke machine. All three of our guides asked us to behave responsibly and not to get too drunk, as tomorrow was an important day. It was Sunday and we were going to visit the Kumsusan, the Palace of the Sun, where beloved President and General are preserved. In the end, there was no danger of anyone getting too wild, as there was no karaoke and they only had those two kinds of beer which were the same as everywhere else, number 1 and number 2. After we returned to the hotel, I explored some North Korean media. I got my hands on a newspaper printed in English called the Pyongyang Times. It consists of only a handful of pages filled with good news and heartwarming stories. They reported about a record catch by the DPRK's fishing fleet and new electric boats commissioned for tourist tours on the Pyongyang's river. Other headlines reported about people already moving into new homes after the northern provinces were hit by floodings. Only negative news was about protests against the president in South Korea. At the time, protests were going on against the ruling president because of scandals associated with her election. Other media I had access to was TV in my hotel room. I browsed through the channels and found there are 3 in total. First was the state television, second was a commercial for the hotel, and the third was Al Jazeera. First, I saw that military ensemble from the other day. I guess they are always on the program before the evening news. The news showed more footage about those families getting new homes, great fishing successes, and there was some happy news from some factory. After that, there was a weather forecast for the whole of Korea, and the program ended at 2200 hours with the national anthem.